Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our buddy read of Mr. Scarborough's Family by Anthony Trollope. I'm having a blast doing this, an absolute blast. I'm having a blast hearing from all of you about it. We are talking about this book, uh, and that's a lot of fun too. It's not just me reading to you. As I said at the beginning, to any of you who are new to this process, this is not an audiobook. this is a very opinionated read through, in which I'm not only answering lots of questions, I hope, but also asking lots of questions. Because this is the fun of doing this sort of thing, is that we're all reading this together. And it could be that a reaction of yours tempers a reaction of mine. That could easily happen. Certainly, I have been, lately, you would think that in this story, which is a story of a sick, dying old father disinheriting his eldest son, declaring to the world that his eldest son is illegitimate, and therefore cannot inherit the property, and therefore the hundreds of thousands of pounds that he's raised on the prospect of inheriting that property can go into the wind. Those creditors can't collect. That eldest son is named Montjoy Scarborough. And you would think that since he and his father are the focus of this book, that would be the focus of the comments that I've received lately. But no, all the comments have been about Mrs. Montjoy, who is Montjoy Scarborough's aunt. I had a couple of emails from a couple of different people on opposite sides of the world, actually, pointing out that there are way too many Montjoys in this book. And that just gets worse now, because now we're dealing not only with another Montjoy, Sir Magnus Montjoy, but his wife, Lady Montjoy. So you've got Florence Montjoy, Mrs. Montjoy, Montjoy Scarborough, the old General Montjoy who's dead, Sir Magnus Montjoy, and Lady Montjoy. So I don't know what we're going to do about that. But a number of you have been focusing on Mrs. Montjoy, Florence Montjoy's mother, who wants Florence to marry Montjoy Scarborough, even though they're first cousins, and even though Montjoy Scarborough has been disinherited and is a disgrace to the world, a gambling addict. A number of you have been sticking up for her, and I put the case about her last time that is going to be made explicit in the chapter that we're dealing with today, that she is probably just trying to save her daughter, no matter how grotesque it looks to us. Now we were up to chapter 14, which is titled, They Arrive in Brussels. That is a reference to the plan that Mrs. Montjoy has to save her daughter from Harry Ainsley. She can't do anything to stop Harry from coming over. She's obviously can't do anything to stop them from corresponding, since Florence can always write a letter and pop it in one of Anthony Trollope's post boxes, completely privately, and contrive with the servants in the household to get Harry's reply, even though she's ordered him not to reply. Mrs. Montjoy knows that. She knows all of that. She's dumb, but she's not that dumb. She knows that the only way that she can actually protect Florence from the influence of Harry Ainsley is to remove her from London, remove her from England. So she does. She decides to go and visit her brother, Sir Magnus Montjoy, who is a diplomat in Brussels. And the chapter title here for chapter 14 is They Arrive in Brussels, which signals, before you've read a word, that the chapter is going to follow Mrs. Montjoy and Florence in their travels and arrive them at the doorstep of Sir Magnus in Brussels. And that raises all sorts of interesting questions, because we're having fun thinking about this book in addition to learning about it. Why would Trollope do that? Remember, Trollope wrote this book at the end of his life. He didn't live long enough to see it come out in book form. He knew everything about the craft of novel writing that there was to know. I know that's not a fashionable opinion, but it's true. And to put it mildly, he has more dramatic plot lines that could make up this chapter. He has Montjoy Scarborough in Monte Carlo. We only saw a glimpse of him there. Don't we want to know more about him and his mysterious attendant inflicted on him by his brother? There's also the narrative of his brother, Augustus Scarborough. Do we want to know more about his scheming, about what he's doing and what he's not doing? There's Harry Ainsley himself, either down at Buston, where he is at odds with his own benefactor, or in London, where he is being watched by the police, who suspect him of foul play in the disappearance of Montjoy Scarborough. And also there's Mr. Scarborough himself, sick and dying down at Tretton Park. That's a lot of high-powered drama that Trollope is ignoring in order to follow Mrs. Montjoy and Florence to Brussels. Why? Why is he doing that? You can guarantee that it isn't whim. Trollope is not a modern writer going between 14-hour doom scrolling cycles and tons of antidepressants mixed with tons of cocaine and grant money that is based entirely on your genetic ancestry instead of any proven talent, so that you can do whatever you want and act on any whim and stop whenever you feel like it. Trollope's not one of those authors. He's planning what he's doing. So why is he doing this? Now, some of the reason why he's doing this, you might not know as a student or as a beginner on this subject. When I taught books in classes, this was where I stepped in, not really as a teacher, because I don't like that relationship, but certainly as someone who is more knowledgeable on the subject. Some of why Trollope decides to do this might depend on that. Do we know? He originally serialized this novel, which means each installment was coming out, and his publisher was getting correspondence about each installment. Did he get a ton of correspondence wanting to see more of Florence Montjoy? Is that why he did this chapter this way? Did he hear from his publisher that could we have a little more of the romance? Could we have a little more of the girl in this to balance things out? If you know that, if that exists, then that might be the reason. But if you don't know that and you're operating without knowing that, then what are the reasons inside the text? I'm not proposing any. I'm just wondering what you think. Why are we moving to Brussels? Why is the story decamping to Brussels? Now, when there's so much else that could be done. When an alternate version of this story where we stick with Harry Ainsley as he pines for Florence, but we don't know anything about what's going on in Brussels with her, why is it that we don't get that alternate storyline? Is it because Trollope wants to see her tempted? Wants us to see her tempted? She's sworn that she will not desert Harry Ainsley for any reason whatsoever, but she's young and inexperienced. Anyway, let's read. They arrive in Brussels. For some weeks after the party at Mrs. Armitage's house and the subsequent explanations with her mother, Florence was made to suffer many things. First came the 1 week before they started, which was perhaps the worst of all. This was specially embittered by the fact that Mrs. Montjoy absolutely refused to divulge her plans as they were made. Probably because she doesn't want Harry Ainsley to know those plans. There was still a fortnight before she could be received at Brussels, and as to that fortnight she would tell nothing. Her knowledge of human nature probably went so far as to teach her that she could not trust, that she could thus most torment her daughter. It was not that she wished to torment her in a revengeful spirit. She was quite sure within her own bosom that she did all in love. She was devoted to her daughter, but she was thwarted, and therefore told herself that she could best further the girl's interest by tormenting her. It was not meditated revenge, but that revenge which springs up without any meditation and is often therefore the most bitter. I must bring her nose to the grindstone, was the manner in which she would probably have expressed her thoughts to herself. Consequently, Florence's nose was brought to the grindstone, and the operation made her miserable. She would not, however, complain when she had discovered what her mother was doing. She asked such questions as appeared to be natural, and put up with the replies, purposely withheld all information. Mamma, have you not settled on what day we shall depart? No, my dear. Mamma, where are we going? I cannot tell you as yet. I am by no means sure myself. I should be glad to know, Mamma, what I am to pack for the journey. Just the same as you would do on any journey. Then Florence held her tongue and consoled herself with thinking of Harry Ainsley. Keep in mind, Mama Montjoy is not, we're told she's not being premeditatedly cruel. But she might also not know the answers to these questions. What should I pack for the journey is a pretty dumb question. It's a journey. You've got a friendly welcome at the other end. It's not like we're hiking in the Alps. But anyway. At last the day came, and she knew that she was to be taken to Boulogne. Before this time she had received one letter from Harry, full of love, full of thanks, just what a lover's letter ought to have been, and yet she was disturbed by it, as well she should be. She told him not to write. It had been delivered to herself in the usual way, and she might have concealed its receipt from her mother, because the servants in the house were all on her side. But this would not be in accordance with the conduct which she had arranged for herself, and so she told her mother. And it is just an acknowledgment of mine to him. It was to have been expected, but I regret it. I do not ask to see it. I could not show it to you, mamma, though I think it right to tell you of it. I do not ask to see it, I tell you. I never wish to hear his name again from your tongue, but I knew how it would be, of course. I cannot allow this kind of thing to go on. It must be prevented. It will not go on, mamma. But it has gone on. You tell me that he has already written. Do you think it proper that you should correspond with a young man of whom I do not approve? Florence endeavored to reflect whether she did think it proper or not. You see, little twit. She thought it quite proper that she should love Harry Annesley with all her heart, but was not quite sure as to the correspondence. At any rate, you must understand, continued Mrs. Mountjoy, that I will not permit it. All letters, while we are abroad, must be brought to me, and if any come from him, they shall be sent back to him. I do not wish to open his letters, but you cannot be allowed to receive them. When we are at Brussels, I shall consult your uncle upon the subject. I am very sorry, Florence, that there should be this cause of quarrel between us, but it is your doing. Again, those of you who are piping up in Mamma Mountjoy's defense, this is all completely clear. There's nothing evil about this. What she's saying here is completely clear. So those of you who are piping up in her defense, well, there you go. You haven't said better from the horse's mouth than anything I could say. Oh, Mamma, why must you be so hard? I am hard because I will not allow you to accept a young man who has, I believe, behaved very badly, and who's got nothing of his own. He is his uncle's heir. Uncle Prosper. We'll be getting lots more of Uncle Prosper. Don't you worry. We know what that may come to. Mountjoy was his father's heir, and nothing could be entailed more strictly than Tretton. We know what entails have come to there. Mr. Prosper will find some way of escaping from it. Entails go for nothing now, and I hear that he thinks so badly of his nephew that he's already quarrelled with him. And he is quite a young man himself. I cannot think how you can be so foolish, you who declare that you are throwing your cousin over because he's no longer to have all his father's property. Oh, Mamma, that is not true. And you Mamma Mountjoy fans will agree, Mrs. Mountjoy is being very unfair there. Florence saying that she's throwing over Mountjoy Scarborough because he's no longer the heir? That's completely false. That is a complete lie. It's a calumny. But notice the scales have at last fallen from Mamma Mountjoy's eyes. She now says, entails me nothing. Very well, my dear, very well. I never allowed it to be said in my name that I was engaged to my cousin Mountjoy. Very well. I will never allow it to be said in my name that with my consent you are engaged to Mr. Harry Annesley. 6 or 7 days after this, they were settled together most uncomfortably in a hotel at Boulogne. I bet the hotel's not uncomfortable. They seem to have ample funds. Mrs. Mountjoy had gone there because there was no other retreat to which she could take her daughter, and because she had resolved to remove her from beyond the sphere of Harry Annesley's influence, Harry Annesley's presence. She had at first thought of Ostend, but it had seemed to her that Ostend was within the kingdom reigned over by Sir Magnus, and that there should be some impropriety in removing from thence to the capital in which Sir Magnus was reigning. It was as though you were to sojourn for 3 days at the park gates before you entertained at the mansion. Therefore they stayed at Boulogne, and Mrs. Mountjoy tried the bathing, cold as the water was with the equinoctial gales, in order that there might be some appearance of the reason for her being at Boulogne. And for company's sake, in the hope of maintaining some fellowship with her mother, Florence bathed also. The bathing here is supposed to be good for your health, but not at this time of year. You're supposed to bathe for your health in high summer. And this would involve walking along a long guiding cable to a box with wheels that had been wheeled out to the water. You'd go into the box and you would put on your bathing clothes, and you would bathe in the water in the box, or maybe a little bit around the box. Although Mrs. Mountjoy bathing in public, I cannot see. We won't talk about shark sightings off the coast of Boulogne. We won't talk about that. Mamma, he has not written again, said Florence, coming up one day from the Strand. I suppose that you're impatient. In other words, you want him to write. Why should there be a quarrel between us? I am not impatient. If you would only believe me, it would be so much more happy for both of us. You always used to believe me. That was before you knew Mr. Harry Annesley. There was something in this very aggravating, something especially intended to excite angry feelings, but Florence was determined to forbear. I think you may believe me, Mamma. I am your own daughter, and I shall not deceive you. I do consider myself engaged to Mr. Annesley. You do not need to tell me that. But while I am living with you, I will promise not to receive letters from him without your leave. If any should come, I will bring them to you unopened, so that you may deal with it as though it had been delivered to yourself. I care nothing about my uncle as to this affair. What he may do cannot affect me, but what you say does affect me very much. I will promise neither to write nor to hear from Mr. Annesley for 3 months. Will that not satisfy you? Mrs. Mountjoy would not say that it did satisfy her, but she somewhat mitigated her treatment of her daughter, till they arrived together at Sir Magnus's mansion. They were shown through the great hall by 3 lackeys into an inner vestibule, where they encountered the great man himself. He was just then preparing to be put onto his horse, and Lady Mountjoy had already gone forth in her carriage for her daily airing, with the object, in truth, of avoiding the newcomers. Trollope is going to be merciless to Sir and Lady Mountjoy. He's going to be merciless to them, even though Sir Magnus is a fairly nice guy. But Lady Mountjoy? No, she got in a carriage and went out specifically so she wouldn't be there when her wretched sister-in-law and her daughter arrive. My dear Sarah, said Sir Magnus, I hope I have the pleasure of seeing you and my niece very well. Let me see, your name is... My name is Florence, said the young lady, so interrogated. Ah, yes, to be sure. I shall forget my own name soon. If anyone was to call me Magnus without the Sir, I should know whom they meant. Then he looked his niece in the face, and it occurred to him that Anderson might not improbably desire to flirt with her. Anderson was the riding attaché who always accompanied him on horseback, and of whom Lady Mountjoy had predicted that he would be sure to flirt with the minister's niece. At that moment Anderson himself came in, and some ceremony of introduction took place. Anderson was a fair-haired, good-looking young man, with that thorough look of self-satisfaction and conceit which attachés were more want to exhibit than to deserve. For the work of an attaché at Brussels is not of a nature to bring forth the highest order of intellect, but the occupations are of a nature to make young men feel that he is not like other young men. He probably has very little to do. Actually, Sir Magnus probably has very little to do, other than be seen. I'm so sorry that Lady Mountjoy has just gone out. She did not expect you till the later train. You have been staying at Boulogne? Why on earth would you stay at Boulogne? Bathing, said Mrs. Mountjoy, in a low voice. Ah, yes, I suppose so. Why did you not come to Ostend? There is better bathing there, and I could have done something for you. What? The horses are ready, are they? I must go now and show myself, or otherwise they will all think I'm dead. If I were absent from the boulevard at this time of day, I should be put in the newspapers. Where is Mrs. Richards? Then the 2 guests, with their own special baker, were made over to the ministerial housekeeper, and Sir Magnus went forth upon his ride. She is a pretty girl, that niece of mine, said Sir Magnus. Uncommonly pretty, said the attaché. But I believe she is engaged to someone. I quite forget who, but I know there is some aspirant. Therefore you had better keep your toe in your pump, young man. I don't know that I shall keep my toe in my pump because there is another aspirant, said Anderson. You rather whet my ardor, sir, to new exploits. In such circumstances one is inclined to think that the aspirant must look after himself. Not that I conceive for a moment that Miss Mountjoy should ever look after me. So you get a hint of their relationship. And it's pretty jocular. It's actually pretty father-son. When Mrs. Mountjoy came down to the drawing-room, there seemed to be quite a party collected to enjoy the hospitality of Sir Magnus, but there were not, in truth, many more than the usual number at the board. There were Lady Mountjoy and Miss Abbott and Mr. Anderson and Mr. Montgomery Arbuthnot and 2 attachés. Mr. Montgomery Arbuthnot was especially proud of his name, but was otherwise rather a humble young man as an attaché, having as yet been only 3 months with Sir Magnus, and desiring of perfecting himself in Foreign Office manners under the tuition of Mr. Anderson. Mr. Blow, the secretary of the legation, was not there. He was a married man of austere manners who, to tell the truth, looked down from a considerable height as regarded the Foreign Office knowledge upon his chief. His chief probably knows very little of Foreign Office business. It was Mr. Blow who did the grinding on behalf of the Belgian legation, and who sometimes did not hesitate to let it be known that such was the fact. Neither he nor Mrs. Blow were popular at the embassy, or maybe perhaps be said that with more truth that the embassy was not popular with them. It may be stated also that there was a clerk attached to the establishment, Mr. Bunderdown, who had been there for some years, and who was good-naturedly regarded by the English inhabitants as a 3rd attaché. Mr. Montgomery Arbuthnot did his best to let it be understood that this was a mistake. In the small affairs of the legation, which no doubt did not go beyond the legation, Mr. Bunderdown generally sided with Mr. Blow. Mr. Montgomery Arbuthnot was recognized as a second mounted attaché, though his attendance on the boulevard was not as constant as that of Mr. Anderson, in consequence probably of the fact that he had not a horse of his own. But there were others also present. There was Sir Thomas Tresham and his wife, who had been sent over to inquire into the iron trade of Belgium. He was a learned free trader who could not be got to agree with the old familiar views of Sir Magnus, who thought that the more iron was produced in Belgium, the less would be forthcoming from England. But Sir Thomas knew better, and as Sir Magnus was quite unable to hold his own with any political economist, he gave him as many dinners and was civil to his wife. Sir Thomas no doubt felt that in doing so, Sir Magnus did all that he could be expected of him. So we're getting a really rapid-fire introduction to the politics of the Brussels embassy here, and a whole bunch of new characters, which, keep in mind, a few chapters ago we said Trollope, the experienced novelist, must know that. He must know that he needs to do that. Lady Tresham was a quiet little woman who could endure to be patronized by Lady Montjoy without annoyance. And there was Mr. Grascour from the Belgian office, who spoke English so much better than the other gentlemen present that a stranger might have supposed him to be a schoolmaster whose mission it was to instruct the English embassy in their own language. "Ah, Mrs. Montjoy, I am so ashamed of myself," said Lady Montjoy, as she waddled into the room 2 minutes after the guests had been assembled. She had a way of waddling that was quite her own, and which they who knew her best declared that she had adopted in lieu of other graces of manner. She puffed a little also, and did contrive to attract peculiar attention. "But I have to be in my carriage every day at the same hour. I don't know what would be thought of us if we were absent." Then she turned with a puff and a waddle to Miss Abbot. "Dear Lady Tresham was with us." Mrs. Montjoy murmured something as to her satisfaction at not having delayed the carriage party, and bethought herself how exactly similar had been the excuse made by Sir Magnus himself. Maybe they talked about it. Then Lady Montjoy gave another little puff and assured Florence that she hoped that she would find Brussels sufficiently gay. Not that we pretend to be all the equal of Paris. "We live in Cheltenham," said Florence, "and that is not at all like Paris. Indeed, I never slept but 2 nights in Paris in my life." "Then we shall try to do very well at Brussels." After this she waddled off again, and was stopped in her waddling by Sir Magnus, who sternly desired her to prepare for the august ceremony of going in to dinner. The one period of real importance at the English embassy was, no doubt, the daily dinner hour. Very little actual work going on here by Sir Magnus and his lady. Florence found herself seated between Mr. Anderson, who had taken her in, and M. Gascoigne, who had been performed the same ceremony for her ladyship. "I am sure you will like this little capital very much," said M. Gascoigne. "It is as much nicer than Paris, as it is smaller and less pretentious." Florence could only assent. "You will soon be able to learn something of us, but in Paris you must be to the manner born, or half a lifetime will not suffice." "We'll put you up on the time of day," said Mr. Anderson, who did not choose, as he said afterwards, that this tidbit should be taken out of his mouth. Poor Florence. "I dare say that all that I shall want will come naturally, without any putting up. You won't find it amiss to know a little of what's what. You have got a riding horse here?" "Oh, no," said Florence. I was going on to say that I can manage to secure one for you. Billabong has got an excellent horse that carried the Princess of Syria last year." Mr. Anderson was supposed to be peculiarly up on everything concerning horses. "But I have not got a habit. That is much more a serious affair, in other words, a riding outfit." "Well, yes, Billabong does not keep habits. I wish he did. But he can manage that too. There does live a habit maker in Brussels." "Ladies' habits certainly are made in Brussels," said M. Gascoigne. "But if Miss Montjoy does not choose to trust herself to a Belgian tailor, there is the railway open to her. An English habit can be sent." "Dear Lady Centaur, who had one sent to her only last year, was just staying here," said Lady Montjoy across her neighbor, with 2 little puffs. "I shall not at all want the habit," said Florence, "not having the horse, and indeed never having been accustomed to ride at all." "Do tell me what it is that you do," said Mr. Anderson, with a convenient whisper, when he found that M. Grascoigne had fallen into conversation with her ladyship. "Lawn tennis?" "I do play at lawn tennis, though I am not wedded to it." "Billiards? I know you play billiards." I never struck a ball in my life. Goodness gracious, how odd. Don't you ever amuse yourself at all? Are they so devotional down at Cheltenham? I suppose we are stupid. I don't know that I ever do especially amuse myself. We must teach you. We really must teach you. I think I may boast of myself that I am a good instructor in that line. Will you promise to put yourself into my hands? You would find me a most unpromising pupil. Not in the least. I will undertake that when you leave this, you shall be au fait in everything. Leapfrog is not too heavy for me, and spillikins not too light. I am up to them all, from backgammon to a cotillion, but not what I prefer the cotillion of my own taste. Or leapfrog, perhaps, suggested Florence. Well, yes, leapfrog used to be a good game at Grother School, and I don't see why we shouldn't have it back again. Ladies, of course, must have a costume on purpose, but I'm fond of anything that requires a costume. Don't you like everything out of the common way? I do. Florence assured him that their tastes were wholly dissimilar, as she liked everything in the common way. That's what I call an uncommonly pretty girl, he said afterwards to Monsieur Grascour, while Sir Magnus was talking to Sir Thomas. What an eye! Yes, indeed, she is very lovely. My word, you may say that, and such a turn of the shoulders. I don't say which are best looking for a rule, English or Belgian, but there are very few of either to come up to her. Anderson, can you tell us how many tons of steel rails they turn out at Liège every week? Sir Thomas asked me just as though it were the simplest question in the world, snapping him back to business. Trying to, anyway. 40 million, said Anderson, more or less. 20,000 would perhaps be nearer the mark, said Monsieur Grascour, but I will send him the exact amount tomorrow. So if Mr. Grascour is right, then Anderson just talks out of his mouth and has no idea what the actual practicalities of his business are. If he's saying, what was it again, 40 million instead of 20,000, he probably doesn't know what he's talking about. But either way, it's an attempt in this dinner, which we get very little of. Trollope gives us a tiny sliver of the dinner instead of the whole thing. I wish he had given us the whole thing. In the midst of all this flutter at dinner, we see Grascour trying to bring Anderson back down to the ground. You've been incredibly flirting with this pretty girl, but you ought to remember that your business. He's not going to remember his business at all. It's just a little spoiler there. We are now thick in another world here, the world of the Brussels legation. So how long are we going to stay here, and why? Why would Trollope do this? Maybe one answer, if we don't descend to anything in his letters or to anything in those letters from readers, or any instructions from his publisher, or any behind the scenes stuff like that. What about if we just stick with what we know? What about you? A lot of you are reading this with me for the first time. I'm incredibly honored by that. What do you think about this? Are you tapping your toe impatiently, or are you wanting to stick with the story in Brussels? And you can wait a while. I know that a number of you are fans of Mama Montjoy, probably more so now that you've read the beginning of this chapter than you were before. But the number one fan favorite in this book so far is old Mr. Scarborough, and we're pretty far away from him. We're going to stay there for another chapter. So what do you think of that? If this was clearly Trollope's decision to move the narrative, do you like it? Do you agree with it as a reader of his? Anyway, we're gonna wrap this up for now, and we'll be back next time. Thank you, BookTube.